Welcome to sleepy Japan. Tonight, we drift together into a quiet story from Japan, a tale shaped by stillness, tradition, and the soft rhythm of night. Before we begin, take a slow breath in and exhale gently. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands rest. Let your thoughts begin to settle as the world around you softens into calm. Imagine a peaceful evening, light from a simple paper lantern drifting across the room, a cool breeze moving just beyond the window. And in the distance, a single temple bell echoing through the night. Each sound carries you deeper into rest. There is nothing you need to do now, nowhere you need to be. Just breathe and let the night open gently around you. Feel peace moving through your body, from your chest to your shoulders, to the quiet rhythm of your breath. The world outside grows silent. Only the sound of your breathing remains, and the soft promise of dreams waiting to unfold. Now, as the moon rises above the hills and the night deepens, let us begin tonight's story. The history of Sakata Kintoki. In the days when cherry blossoms fell like prayers, and the imperial palace stood wrapped in the soft mists of morning, there served a young warrior whose name was whispered with respect throughout the capital. His name was Sakata Kurando, and he wore the armor of the emperor's personal guard, moving through the palace corridors with a grace that seemed almost to defy the weight of steel upon his shoulders. Among the warriors of the court, Kurando was known for something rare, something that set him apart from the others who served. Yes, he possessed skill with the blade. Yes, his courage was unquestioned, but it was his gentle spirit, his capacity for kindness, that truly marked him as different. His hands, though trained to strike, were equally capable of tenderness, and his eyes, though sharp in watching, held a warmth that spoke of understanding, of compassion, of a heart that had not hardened, despite the demands of his profession. In those same days, in the district of Gojozuka, where the old wooden houses leaned close to one another, as if sharing secrets, there lived a young woman whose beauty was spoken of in hushed and reverent tones. Her name was Yaégiri, and she moved through the world with the quiet elegance of a willow branch bending in the evening breeze. When cherry blossoms bloomed, people said the trees were trying to match her beauty. When the moon rose full, they said it paused in its journey, just to cast its light upon her face. But Yaégiri herself paid little attention to such romantic talk. She lived simply, attended to her duties, and waited, though for what, she could not have said. It is written in the old texts that certain souls are bound together before they ever meet, connected by invisible threads that pull them toward one another across distance and time. And so it was, perhaps inevitably, that Kurando and Yaégiri found themselves face to face one spring evening when the plume blossoms filled the air with fragrance, and the world seemed to hold its breath. They met beneath the blossoms, and in that moment, something shifted in the fabric of both their lives. No words were needed, for their hearts recognized what their minds were only beginning to understand. They had found one another. From that evening forward, whenever Kurando's duties allowed, he would make his way through the winding streets to Gojozaka. They would walk together, speaking of many things and of nothing at all, finding in each other's presence a peace neither had known before. Sometimes they sat in the garden behind Yaégiri's house, watching the koi drift through the still water, their scales catching the fading light, turning to copper, to gold, to flame. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, content to share the moment, needing no words for what passed between them. The summer came, and the cicadas sang, their ancient chorus filling the warm nights with sound. And through it all, their love grew deeper, quieter, more certain. But the imperial court, like all places of power, harboured shadows, where jealousy and ambition festered in the dark. There were men who watched Kurando's growing reputation with envious eyes. Men who resented his skill, his honour, the easy respect he commanded from those around him. These men gathered in corners, speaking in low voices, weaving their webs of rumour and innuendo. They whispered doubts, they planted questions, they spread their poison, drop by careful drop, until even the emperor himself began to wonder. Could Kurando be trusted? Was his loyalty as pure as it appeared? Or was there something hidden, something treacherous, lurking beneath the surface? The whispers grew louder, the doubts multiplied, and finally, on a day when the wind blew cold from the northern mountains, Kurando was summoned before his lord. The audience was brief. The words, though few, carried the weight of finality. Kurando was dismissed, stripped of his rank, his position, his place in the world. He became Ronin, masterless, adrift. In the days that followed, Kurando found himself wandering the city streets that had once been so familiar, but now felt foreign, hostile even. His poverty grew as the last of his savings dwindled away. His pride, though wounded, still burned within him, preventing him from seeking help, from begging, from accepting charity. And most painful of all, he could no longer bring himself to visit Yaégiri. What could he offer her now? What right did he have to burden her with his disgrace? Better, he thought, to disappear. Better to let her believe he had forgotten her than to let her see him brought so low. And so, one night, when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, Kurando slipped away from the capital. He left no word, no message, no trace. He simply vanished. The cherry blossoms came again, blooming in their appointed time, filling the gardens with beauty, but Kurando was not there to see them. The plum trees blossomed, scenting the evening air, but Kurando was not there to walk beneath their branches. And Yaégiri, waiting in her house at Gojozaka, watching the gate, listening for his footsteps, gradually came to understand that something had happened. At first, she told herself, he was simply delayed, that his duties had kept him away. But days became weeks, and weeks became months, and still There was no sign, no word, only silence. She grew thin with worry, her face becoming pale, her eyes losing their brightness, shadowed now with fear and grief. Her family watched with growing concern, but she could not explain what troubled her. How could she tell them about this love that had bloomed in secret and now withered in that same secrecy? The autumn winds began to blow, cold and insistent, stripping the leaves from the trees. And finally, Yaégiri knew what she must do. One night, when the house was quiet and her family slept, she gathered a few simple things, wrapped them in a cloth, and slipped out into the darkness. She would find Kurando. However long it took, however far she had to travel, she would find him. For what was life without the one who made it meaningful? And so Yaégiri began her long search. She walked the roads of Japan, travelling from village to village, asking at every inn, every marketplace, every crossroads, "Have you seen a man, a warrior, a Ronin, with gentle eyes and a warrior's bearing?" But no one remembered. Or if they did, the face they recalled was not quite right, the description not quite matching. The roads were filled with masterless samurai, each one bearing his own burden of shame or misfortune. One face blurred into another, one story merged with 1,000 others. Still, Yaégiri continued. Through rain and heat, through the changing seasons, she walked on, driven by a love that would not let her rest. Meanwhile, far from the capital, in a distant province, Kurando had indeed transformed his life entirely. Unable to find work as a warrior, his name tainted by disgrace, he had taken up a humble trade. He became a tobacco merchant. He travelled from place to place, carrying his goods upon his back, calling out his wares in a voice that once had commanded soldiers. It was simple work, far removed from glory, but Kurando performed it with dignity. In the simplicity of his new life, he found, if not peace, then at least a kind of acceptance. Yet always, always, in the quiet moments, when he rested by the roadside or lay down to sleep beneath the stars, he thought of Yaégiri. He wondered if she had forgotten him. He hoped she had. It would be easier, he thought, if she could simply let him go. But fate, though it may delay, is not to be denied. It happened one autumn day, on a road that wound through golden rice fields, where the grain stood tall, ready for harvest, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. Two travellers approached from opposite directions. One, a tobacco merchant, bent under his load, his face weathered by wind, but still carrying himself with quiet grace. The other, a woman, thin from travel, her clothes dusty, but her eyes still bright, with determined hope. They passed each other. In that moment of passing, something made them pause. Slowly, as if afraid, that movement might shatter, whatever fragile thing hung in the air between them, they turned. Their eyes met. Yaégiri? Kurando breathed, and the word was both a prayer and a lament. Kurando, she whispered, and suddenly all the months of searching, all the miles of lonely roads, collapsed into nothing. She ran to him. They held each other, there in the middle of that country road, as the wind moved through the rice stalks, making a sound like the ocean like breathing, like the world itself, sighing with relief. For a long time, they simply stood thus, holding one another, as if to let go would be to lose each other, all over again. But at last, Kurando gently drew back, and taking Yaégiri's hands, he looked into her face with an expression of such profound sadness that her heart trembled. "You should not have searched for me," he said softly. "I have nothing now, nothing but shame and poverty. You should have forgotten me, made a life without this weight of my disgrace." But Yaégiri shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "How could I forget you?" she asked. "How could I live when my heart was walking the roads of Japan without me? I would rather share one day of poverty with you than a lifetime of comfort without you beside me." Kurando closed his eyes, and a single tear traced its way down his weathered face. In that moment, he knew what he must do. He led Yaégiri away from the road to a quiet place where a small stream flowed and willow trees grew, their branches trailing in the clear water. They sat together in the shade of the willows, and Kurando spoke. He spoke of his love for her, which had never diminished despite the separation. He spoke of his shame, of his certainty that he could never reclaim what had been lost. And finally, as the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in shades of amber and rose, he spoke of his final wishes. "Live well," he told her. "Find joy, if you can. Remember me, but do not let that memory become a chain that binds you to sorrow. The world is wide, and you are young, and somewhere there is happiness waiting for you to claim it." Yaégiri listened, understanding what he meant, yet powerless to stop him. This was his choice, made from love, even if it was a love she could not comprehend, could not accept. And so, as the light faded and the first stars appeared, trembling in the darkening sky, Sakata Kurando chose death over dishonor, silence over struggle. Yaégiri buried him there, beside the stream, beneath the willow trees. She gathered smooth stones from the water's edge and built a small cairn to mark the place where he rested. And as she worked, her tears falling freely, she sang to him an old song about impermanence, about the beauty of blossoms that bloom for only a moment before they fall. When her task was complete, when the last stone was placed and the final prayer spoken, Yaégiri stood and looked around. She did not know where to go now. She knew only that she could not return to the capital, could not go back to the life she had known. So she began to walk, following no path, letting her feet carry her wherever they would lead. Days passed into weeks, and Yaégiri found herself travelling deeper into wild country, away from settlements, away from the world of people. The mountains rose before her, their peaks touching clouds, their forests dark and deep. At last she came to a place where the paths grew narrow and travellers were few, and the boundary between the human world and the spirit world seemed thin as silk. This was Ashigara Mountain, remote and lonely, a place of power and of silence. Here, Yaégiri made her home. She found a cave, sheltered from weather, and she gathered moss to make a bed. She learned which plants could sustain her, and she drank from the mountain streams, that tumbled down from the heights above. And here, in this place of solitude, she discovered that she carried within her a final gift from Kurando. She was with child. The seasons turned, as they always do, indifferent to human joy or human sorrow. Summer gave way to autumn. Autumn yielded to winter, and the snow fell thick upon Ashigara Mountain, covering everything in white stillness. And in the heart of that winter, when the world seemed frozen in silence, Yaégiri gave birth to a son. The moment the child drew his first breath and cried out, something extraordinary happened. This was no ordinary infant. Even as his birth cries faded, even as Yaégiri reached, with trembling hands, to hold her newborn, the baby sat up. His eyes, bright and clear, looked around with intelligence that no newborn should possess. And then, before his mother's astonished gaze, the child stood. He took one step, then another, moving with confidence that defied nature itself. And then, laughing with pure delight, the baby began to run. Out of the cave he went, into the snowy forest, leaping over fallen logs, scrambling up rocky slopes, moving with supernatural speed, as if he had been running all his life. Yaégiri, weak from childbirth, could only watch in wonder. But she felt no fear. Somehow, she understood that this child was touched by something beyond the ordinary world. He carried his father's strength and something more, something ancient, something connected to the mountain itself. Days became weeks, and the child, whom Yaégiri called Little Wonder, continued to grow in ways that defied all natural law. Each day he grew stronger, until he could lift boulders that grown men could not budge. He could run faster than the deer that grazed in mountain meadows, and climb with the agility of the monkeys in the forest canopy. And always he was filled with joy, with an exuberance that seemed to light up the lonely mountain. His laughter echoed through the valleys, and the animals, instead of fleeing, seemed drawn to him. Birds would land on his outstretched hands, deer would approach without fear, and even the foxes would come to play in the clearings where he danced and ran. One day, when Little Wonder was playing among the great cedar trees, he noticed something high in the branches of the tallest cedar of all. There, nested in the crown, where the wind whispered its endless secrets, was a structure, woven with uncanny skill, from twigs and leaves, and something else, something that shimmered in the dappled light. It was a tengu's nest. The tengu, those strange beings, half bird and half man, who dwell in remote mountains and possess powers beyond human understanding. They are tricksters and teachers, feared by some, respected by others, and always best left undisturbed. But Little Wonder, who knew nothing of caution and understood only the joy of testing himself, looked up at that nest and felt a surge of determination. He approached the cedar, its trunk so massive that 10 men with linked hands could not encircle it. He placed his small hands against the rough bark, and then he began to push. At first, nothing happened. The tree stood as it had stood for centuries, rooted deep, unmoved, unmovable. But Little Wonder closed his eyes and drew upon that deep reservoir of supernatural strength that dwelt within him. His hands pressed harder. His body tensed. And slowly, incredibly, the great cedar began to sway. Back and forth it moved, at first barely perceptible, then more pronounced, until the whole massive tree was rocking in a great arc, its crown cutting through the sky itself. Birds fled from the branches, smaller trees trembled in sympathy, and in the topmost reaches, the tengu's nest began to break apart. Twigs scattered, leaves whirled away, and then, with a final tremendous shake, the nest itself came tumbling down. It fell through the air, breaking apart as it fell, until it landed at Little Wonder's feet, nothing more than scattered sticks and moss. The boy laughed, clapping his hands, delighted with himself. But he was not alone. For on that very day, the great hero, Minamoto no Yorimitsu, had come to Ashigara Mountain to hunt. With him rode his retainers, men whose names were becoming legendary throughout Japan. Watanabe Isuna, fierce and loyal, unwavering in battle. Usui Sadamitsu, whose strength was matched only by his cunning. And others besides, each a warrior of great renown. They had been tracking a magnificent stag through the mountain forests when they heard the sound of the great cedar swaying. At first they thought it must be an earthquake, for what else could move such an ancient tree? But when they rode closer and saw a small child standing at the cedar's base, surrounded by the wreckage of what had clearly been a tengu's nest, they stopped in amazement. Yorimitsu, who had faced demons and monsters without flinching, felt a thrill of excitement run through him. "This is no ordinary child," he said to his men. "Look at him. He shows no fear, no awareness even of what he has done." To shake down a tengu's nest requires not only strength, but a purity of spirit that is very rare. Watanabe Isuna rode his horse closer, circling the child, who watched him with bright, curious eyes. "Boy," Watanabe called, "what is your name? Who are your parents? How came you to this lonely place?" But Little Wonder, who had lived all his life in the wilderness and knew only his mother's voice, did not answer. He simply smiled, that radiant smile that seemed to illuminate the shadowed forest, and then turned and ran, disappearing among the trees as quickly as thought. "Find his mother," Yorimitsu commanded. "Someone must live here. Someone must care for this child. Find them and bring them to me." The warriors found Yaégiri's cave without much difficulty. They approached respectfully, these hardened men of war, for something about this place demanded reverence. Yaégiri emerged slowly, stepping into sunlight, her simple robe worn thin, her hair loose and unbound, but her dignity undiminished. She looked at the warriors without fear and waited. Watanabe Isuna bowed, more deeply than he would, to many noble ladies. "Honored mother," he said, "our lord Minamoto no Yorimitsu wishes to speak with you. We mean no harm, we come only with questions, and perhaps with opportunity." Yaégiri inclined her head and followed the warriors back to where Yorimitsu waited. The great hero dismounted when he saw her approach, showing her the respect he would give an equal. "Good woman," he said gently, "I have seen your son and witnessed his abilities. Tell me, who is his father? What is the lineage of this remarkable child? And so, there in the forest, with the wind sighing through cedar branches and the distant sound of a mountain stream, Yaégiri told her story. She spoke of Kurando, the gentle warrior who had served with honor. She spoke of his disgrace, unjust though it was, and of his transformation into a wandering merchant. She spoke of their meeting on that road through rice fields, and of the decision he made in his pride and despair. And finally, her voice growing soft, she spoke of her journey to this mountain and of the birth of her son, who had come into the world already touched by power beyond ordinary understanding. When she finished, silence fell over the group. Even these warriors, who had seen death and glory in equal measure, felt moved by her tale. Yorimitsu stood quietly, considering. Finally, he spoke. "This child does not belie his lineage," he said. "He carries his father's strength, his father's courage, and something more besides. Such a child should not grow up, hidden in these mountains, unknown to the world." He turned to Yaégiri, his eyes kind. "Give the boy to me," he said. "Let me take him and train him and make him one of my retainers. I will teach him not only strength, but honor, not only courage, but compassion. He will become a great warrior, and his father's name will be redeemed through his deeds." Yaégiri looked at Yorimitsu, this famous hero, whose name was known throughout all Japan. She thought of her son, growing up alone on this lonely mountain, with no companions but trees and animals, and herself. She thought of Kurando, and of the honor he had lost, and of the opportunity now being offered to restore that honor. And she knew, with the certainty that comes from a mother's heart, what she must do. "Take him," she said softly. "Teach him well, and help him grow into the man his father would have been proud to know. But let me remain here, in these mountains. This is my home now, and here I am content." Yorimitsu bowed deeply, honoring her decision. "It shall be as you wish." And so it was arranged. Little wonder, when he was called, came running from the forest, leaping and bounding with irrepressible energy. Yaégiri knelt and took his face in her gentle hands. "You are going on a journey," she told him. "You will learn many things and become strong in ways beyond even your current strength. Remember always that you are your father's son, and that he loved you, though he never knew you." The boy, with understanding that seemed to transcend his years, nodded solemnly. Then he threw his arms around his mother's neck and held her tight. And Yaégiri, holding him close, felt tears run down her face, though whether they were tears of sorrow or joy, she could not have said. Yorimitsu approached and gently lifted the child onto his horse. "I name you Sakata Kintoki," he said. "Carry that name with honor, for it connects you to your father's legacy and to the future that awaits you." And with that, the party set off, riding down from the mountain toward the world of men. Yaégiri stood outside her cave, watching until they disappeared among the trees. And then, slowly, she turned back to her solitary life. But she did not grieve, for she knew that her son would do great things, and that Kurando's spirit wherever it might be, would rest more peacefully, knowing that his child would grow into a hero. And indeed, as the years passed, Sakata Kintoki grew in strength and wisdom. Under Yorimitsu's guidance, he learned not only the arts of war, but the deeper arts of loyalty and compassion. He became famous throughout Japan for his incredible strength and for his gentle heart. Children everywhere came to love his story, and they would carry his portrait tucked in their kimono as a talisman of courage and as a reminder that even from great sadness can come great joy. His adventures became legend, his deeds were sung by poets, and his name, Sakata Kintoki, became synonymous with the very best of what a warrior could be. And as for Yaégiri, the old woman of the mountain, as she came to be known, she lived out her days in peace and solitude. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, when mist rolled through valleys, and the world seemed suspended between waking and dreaming, travellers would catch a glimpse of a figure standing at the forest's edge. And they would know, without knowing how they knew, that this was the mother of the great hero Kintoki, watching still over her mountain home, keeping faith with the memory of the love she had known and the son she had given to the world. The seasons continued their turning, as they always do, as they always will. Spring brought cherry blossoms, cascading like snow. Summer brought green growth and the song of cicadas. Autumn brought turning leaves, painting the mountains in gold and crimson. And winter brought the snow, covering everything in pristine silence. And through it all, the story of Sakata Kintoki was told and retold, passed down through generations. A tale of love and loss, of courage and redemption, of a mother's sacrifice, and a son's triumph. For in the end, it is not the great battles, or the mighty deeds alone that matter. It is the quiet moments, the small acts of love, the gentle persistence of hope in the face of despair, that shape the course of lives and echo through the ages. And so, on Ashigara Mountain, where the cedar trees still stand, and the wind still whispers its eternal secrets, and the streams still tumble down from the heights, there remains a presence, soft as moonlight, gentle as first snow. It is the spirit of a love that transcended death, the memory of a warrior who chose honor even in defeat, and the blessing of a mother who gave her son to greatness, though it cost her everything. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, when the stars shine bright and the world holds its breath, you can almost hear the laughter of a child running through the ancient forest, filled with joy and possibility and the promise of all that is yet to come. The mountain sleeps, the night grows still, and peace, like snow falling softly, settles over everything. And so the story fades, not with finality, but with gentle dissolution, like lantern light, growing dim at dawn, like footprints in snow, slowly covered by new falling flakes. The tale of Sakata Kintoki remains, whispered by the wind, remembered by the mountains, carried forward in the hearts of those who understand that courage comes in many forms, and that love, once given truly, never truly ends. And now, dear listener, as the story fades and sleep draws near, may you rest in the knowledge that even in darkness there is light, that even in sorrow there is hope, and that every ending is also a beginning. Sleep well and dream of mountains, and of heroes, and of love that endures beyond all measure.